Would you ever agree to be a human lab rat? Our next guest was studied by a team of scientists for 30 years, but it's an experiment she never agreed to. Here's a bit of her story.
I don't remember a time in my life when I wasn't being studied. I had a unique childhood in that I grew up in Berkeley, and both my parents were English professors, so I lived in a house that was filled with books. And it just so happened that the year that I started preschool, I became one of over 100 Berkeley kids who were part of a 30-year longitudinal study that's largely known as the block study. The preschool, which was made for spying on children, it had these mirror twin classrooms where there was a hidden observation gallery between them. And then it also had testing rooms that had one-way mirrors and eavesdropping devices where we would go to be assessed individually. Being studied made me feel special. My parents were intellectuals. They were kind of remote and cool. And when I was being studied, I was getting what I wanted, which was a lot of close attention from an adult. They weren't interested in anything else but who I was. They knew me better than my parents did.
Susannah Breslin, welcome to DBL.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Susannah, your parents signed you up for this study the day that you were born. Why did they want you to be a part of something like this?
Well, I just want to clarify a couple of things first. One was that I wasn't in the study my whole life. It was 30 years. And while I didn't know that I was being studied as a child, I did realize, I guess when I was around 7 or 8, that I was part of this bigger project. So at a certain point I did know, and at a certain point I did consent to be studied as a minor and as an adult. My parents, like I said, were intellectuals. I grew up in Berkeley, and the preschool had a kind of prestige to it. It was a laboratory preschool. You know, at the time, it was the late 60s, and Berkeley was like a freewheeling place. And if you were part of the sort of intellectual elite, I think it was an attractive idea to have a kid like in this important psychological study. A contemporary point of comparison might be like, wouldn't you do everything for your kids so that they would have the best opportunities later? You know, get them into the right preschool so they can get into the Ivy League later on. So I think they thought they were setting me up for success. My actual experience was a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, I have so many questions. I'm glad you cleared up a couple of those things. But what were researchers of the Block study actually looking for?
So at the time, Jack and Jean Block, who were the principal investigators of the study, at the time they created the study, there was this paradigm crisis in personality research. And the question was really like, do people have personality traits that shape their behavior and remain relatively stable over time? Or is human behavior really shaped by the situations in which we find ourselves? And at the time, the answer wasn't clear. The Blocks believed that people have personality traits, and who you are as a kid is relatively comparable to who you are as an adult. But that was a theory, and the only way to prove it was to undertake this really ambitious, groundbreaking study by following a group of over 100 kids, Berkeley kids, from when we were about 3 or 4 until we were in our early 30s. And essentially, they proved their theory correct, that you could tell a lot about who we were going to grow up to be based on who we were as early as 3 and 4.
As you entered elementary and middle school, how was your life different from quote unquote the normal kids? And how did you explain those differences to your classmates?
Yeah, so, it's funny because the study is so much a part of me. It's very normal to me have been studied since I was a kid. when my friends, when I was a kid, found out, they were like, whoa, like, that's weird. That sounds cool. The blocks actually, when we were, I think around 10, they turned a RV into a mobile laboratory that they would bring around and park in front of our homes and our schools. And so sometimes I would get pulled out of class so I could go be assessed in this RV that actually had a hidden compartment in the back with a one-way mirror through which another researcher was watching me and the researcher who was assessing me. So I think the other kids thought it was cool that I, got to leave math class, which was good for me too, since I'm not good at math still.
Well, we could talk to you about the actual study forever. I mean, it was 30 years of your life. But one thing that I think only somebody like you could speak to is like, what was life like when the study stopped? Was it abrupt? Like, how did that affect you?
That's a great question. My parents were a bit distant. My mother was really kind of emotionally cool, and the study was really important to me and was kind of like a third parent. And it kind of gave me a sense that I had a higher purpose in life. I'm not just living my life and, making mistakes. I'm contributing to the enlightenment of humanity by being in this study in some way. So it was difficult when it ended. I think I was a little heartbroken. A decade later, as a journalist, I went to sort of uncover the story behind the study. And I think in a way it got me involved in the study again. So now I kind of feel like the study is still a part of my life, just in a different way.
That makes sense.
Oh man, I mean, first of all, the book Data Baby, I love the title. We obviously have so many more questions, but Susannah, thank you for being here and sharing your extraordinary story. DVL Nation, you can get your copy of Data Baby, My Life as a Psychological Experiment, available now. Thank you so much again for sharing your story with us.